running the meeting, my video is disabled.
That was intentional. That was intentional, yeah.
Oh, it was? Oh, okay.
Let me get started. All right, so Chair Nancy Navarro and I, as co-chairs of the Joint Committee, PHED and GO, we're convening for our second conversation here on the subdivision staging policy or proposed growth policy. And Pam and Glenn and Bob have been working on a lot of different issues here, so I'll turn it over to them to start walking us through the packet, which of course everyone can see at the County Council's website. Again, this is a joint meeting of the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee and the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee.
Good morning. I'm going to start, and I am going to ask if you'd like, I can share my screen. I have some slides that, as we go through the packet, they may be useful, little bigger images of some of the things we'll be talking about. So I'm going to try to do that now. I think
Pam, while you're doing that, can I just announce about the change in this calendar, just while everybody's here?
Yeah.
Two things. First of all, as a result of last Friday's PHED meeting on transportation issues, there's a lot of follow-up, and so we've scheduled a meeting now for Friday morning, October the 9th, a week from Friday, from 10:30 to 12:30 to cover those issues. And just really late-breaking news, the GO committee that was scheduled for this coming Tuesday afternoon, October the 6th at 3:30, that's been bumped because the discussion of the solar ZTA that afternoon. And so we found an alternative time for that, which is also Friday, October 9th in the afternoon. So that's GO. And whatever we were going to cover that after October 6th in the afternoon, we're not going to do October 9th in the afternoon. And we'll send out a revised calendar to folks, later today. But those are two changes in the schedule.
Thank you. Can I just,
before
you get started, just want to thank everybody. There's a terrific group assembled here. I see we have, an incredible cast of experts at planning. We have MCPS, the executive branch, and I know that everyone's been working on this for over a year, and we just really appreciate it. We have to move expeditiously through this at the council level, and it may not reflect the inordinate effort you've put in, just because it's not as visible here. But I know it's been just a constant project for so long, and we really appreciate the amazing work that everybody has done, all the different institutions and teams put together. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead then, if everyone's all right, and get started. I have requested screen sharing, but hasn't been enabled yet. So it's not necessary, but I think it'll be useful, and hopefully it'll, there we go. Got it just now. Okay, hopefully, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not going to put it on slideshow mode because it's easier sometimes just to move back and forth if I leave it like this. Hopefully it's visible to everyone. But today, so we have the joint committee together. There are a couple issues that the planning board has put forward in their draft that affect both how impact taxes are calculated, and they affect the way that the SSP is administered. So that's why we've gotten the two committees together. You did the same thing for transportation, but for schools, there are two primary components of both that are cross-cutting. The first one is multifamily structures. So the recommendation here is that there's one impact tax rate for multifamily units. The recommendation is not to split them by what is low rise and high rise, which today is the current way in which we have four structure types used for impact taxes, and the four structure types noticed for when the planning board evaluates development applications, what their impact on the school system will be, and for master planning, again, what the impact on the school system will be. And so by going to one multifamily unit type, you no longer have that delineation. So the question is really, is there still value in having 4 structure types? Today, the way that the structure types are defined is that anything that is 4 stories or less is defined as low-rise multifamily, and anything 5 stories or greater is high-rise multifamily. So in evaluating whether or not the committee would want to consider moving in the direction of the planning board recommendation to have just one rate, or to continue to have the 2 different structure types as part of the analysis for taxation and for the SSP. I looked at the student generation rates that had been calculated since 2003. 2003 is when structure types were first used to evaluate and to create student generation rates. They were updated significantly in 2007. They've been updated in between a few times. I didn't want to put everyone in there, but I wanted to give you a good range of them and a range of sort of what they represent. So in the early years, they were, student generation rates came from the Census Update Survey. It was a survey that the planning department created and evaluated, and from it came a lot of great demographic data specific to Montgomery County and to neighborhoods in Montgomery County. And so those early years, the student generation rate came from an estimate of students generated based on that survey. A huge move occurred in 2013 when the planning department and the MCPS worked together, and MCPS has allowed the planning department to evaluate all of their student data. They have every enrollment record, but they've scrapped it of personal information, and it really is grade level and address for every student in MCPS. And the planning department has done an amazing amount of work. They started in 2013 creating a database of every student and every student address, and they update it every 2 years. And from that, they do calculate these student generation rates, and they can calculate student generation rates given this for any geography, structure type, area of the county, and that's what they do. So with that, what you can see on the chart, though, is that the proportion of students between a detached and attached single-family house is pretty consistent. They are both generating students at around the same rate. But the proportion of low-rise to high-rise has consistently stayed pretty different. So we can see that low-rise really do produce about 2 or 3 times as many students as the high-rise units, which to me lends itself to say I think that we should continue following and evaluating our master plans, our development applications, and our taxation by having 2 separate structure types for multifamily. Now I know that one of the concerns, there were a couple concerns that planning had related to this, to having the structure types separated. It didn't just have to do with generation rates themselves per se, had to do with the availability of data, and had to do with really the definitions of high-rise and low-rise. And while I think that the data work can have its challenges, I think that with the amount of data sets and collaborative work that's done between MCPS and the planning department, that I think they can work through some of the data issues. Given they've been doing this now since 2013 and they have a really robust database to start with, I think the real issue then comes down to I think it has some validity is what is the definition between high rise and low rise? We have used the definition, the distinction between 4 and 5 stories for decades in the county. And I think that it would be interesting. I don't think there's time between now and the approval of this document, but maybe between now and the next update to the student generation rates, because they're biennial, council may want to have the planning department undertake a research to say, does 4 and 5 stories still represent what we think of as low rise and high rise? That distinction was really made based on construction methodology, construction materials, and those things translated into cost, right? We now know they're doing stick-built construction greater than 4 stories. So if you really evaluated, would possibly you say that anything that's 6 stories or below is low rise and something above 6 stories is high rise? Again, that could change things. So that's just one thing for the committee to consider and the council to consider whether that research is done. I think it would be beneficial to everybody. But that said, I council staff's recommendation is that we retain the low rise and the high rise structure types. So that's the recommendations right now that you could discuss or take a vote on.
Great. Do you want to take it back to somewhere where we can all gaze into one another's eyes?
Yes.
Or gaze into our own eyes, as the case may be.
How's that?
One of the worst parts about Zoom is like you never know who to look at when you're talking, and you end up looking at yourself, don't you? It's weird. Okay, let's get a little commentary from Jason. Can you just, any response you'd like to have?
Sure. So thank you. For the record, Jason Sartori, Chief of Countywide Planning at the Planning Department. So a couple of things on this. First, Ms. Dunn is correct in that we have been for a number of years now working on kind of building up our ability to calculate these. But every time we do them, so for instance, today, September 30th, and Ms. McGuire can acknowledge this, I think, that today is the day that MCPS announces, but it takes their official enrollment, September 30th every year. After this, we will send a request to MCPS to have them send us their enrollment data. So we start working on the process of updating those student generation rates. When we do that, we also take a snapshot of our housing database, our housing data, which comes from the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. That data, now we need to, because it's a snapshot that we took today, it does not incorporate any of the quality control work that we've done over the past 2 years over our old set of data. So we have to go through and somewhat manually go and update things. In some cases, it's data that SSTAT is no longer maintaining. And so in the past where we've tried to say, hey, look, you've identified this incorrectly, please make this correction. It's high rise, not low rise. They're not doing that anymore. So it is still, while we have a good data set to work off of, it's still pretty labor intensive. But that said, we can work through that and we can do this designation. But the concern in part that we have is that we think that demonstrating a distinction between high rise and low rise in their student generation rates is not a sufficient reason to maintain that, using that distinction. Because, for instance, if we saw that houses painted blue were generating more students compared to houses painted red, should we use that distinction? We think that's fairly arbitrary. We think that the high rise, low rise is also increasingly more and more arbitrary. It used to be an acknowledgement of the type of construction. But that connection is much weaker today. Because the idea was that if you were building using steel or concrete, it was much more expensive. And so a developer might try to take advantage of building smaller units so they could build more units and charge more, so that, and as a result, these smaller units in these high-rise structures were generating far fewer students. Well, now you can build more affordable high-rise. What we still consider high-rise is 5 stories and above using wood frame. But what we're seeing is that the wood frame construction that we're getting today is not at all the same as what we were getting decades ago. And so they're still smaller. They're not generating the number of students. And so when we start looking at this by year built, we're seeing that the distinction is starting to go away. But the concern that we have is that the 4 stories or 5 stories distinction is relatively arbitrary at this point. And the more that gets blurred, the less confidence we have in using that as the basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. For my colleagues, so I've Councilmember Jawanda has a question. Given the number of people, please text me unless it's clear we're all looking at each other. Then you want to wave. We'll try to all. And forgive me if I somehow lose track, but I'll try very hard not to.
What's your text?
I'm going to guess that no one on earth is watching this other than people who really need my cell phone number. So
I'll text Meredith your cell phone number.
Yeah,
okay?
just email it to her or something.
Yeah. Please, someone send Meredith my cell phone number, please.
All right.
Thank you. That's probably the wiser approach. Okay, so again, I just want to see if I understand this, and then we'll move through questions. So this is really, from planning board's perspective, a simplification issue, but from planning staff's, from council staff's perspective, it isn't really necessary, and the data sets are going to be even more available in the future. Is that right, Pam? Is that how you would characterize
Well,
it?
I don't think I would strongly say that the data sets will be more available in the future, but I do believe that I don't believe that because it is labor intensive to compare all the hard work that's done in the previous update to the generation rates with new data from MCPS on enrollment. I don't think that should outweigh, and I don't think they're necessarily saying that itself would outweigh the fact that I think if you look at the chart on the staff report on page 3, I mean, we are seeing that there's a difference, and while creating those distinctions may have seemed somewhat arbitrary, although I don't think so, because I think, as Mr. Sartori mentioned, they were based on the fact that we thought there were relative cost differences, right? And those relative cost differences impact rents, therefore impact potentially, a family's ability to stay in a unit type, or the fact that maybe the low-rise are built with larger units inside them.
Okay.
And
I've got Will, followed by Andrew.
And I'll just mention is, when you look at that chart, we're still seeing a difference. Whether that 4 and 5 story difference is as strong. That's why it will be really good to let's do research and find it. Maybe that has changed, and that will change some of these relative rates. But if we're still seeing today, even in the current most updated planning board numbers on student generation rate, the relationship holds, and I think we should continue to.
Okay, and Gwen Wright wants to make a comment. I don't know, Will, if you wanted to just go ahead, or okay.
I might be able to add some things that add a little more information, and that might help with the comments. One of the problems is that our building types have changed. So in terms of calculating generation rates, we're looking at the existing buildings that are on the ground today. And we do have a lot of 4-story buildings on the ground today that were built in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and they are larger units, and they do generate more children. What is happening, and so in terms of generation rates, that may be a very legitimate thing to think about. The problem with the impact tax side of it and using it for impact taxes is, I can tell you, having reviewed all of our development cases over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, we have almost no 4-story multifamily buildings being constructed. The ones that are being constructed are 2/2s, which count as 4 stories, and they are 2 large. In essence, they're like a duplex, except one on top of the other instead of next to each other. But we do not have people building the kind of 4-story multifamily that they had built in the 50s, 60s, 70s. What we have people building all the time, again, this is sort of our missing middle discussion. We have single-family homes, we have townhouses. We have a small number of 2/2s, which are those 4-story buildings, but they really function essentially like duplexes, or almost like 2 townhouses. And we have these 6 to 7-story wood frame multifamily on top of a concrete podium. And we have some high rise, above that, which is done in steel or concrete. But I think the problem that we're struggling with is that as a building type going forward, not including what's on the ground today, but going forward, the 4-story isn't happening. And so we certainly understand, maybe you have to think about it from a student generation perspective, but then how do you use that and translate that into the impact tax side? Because we just don't have that building type happening. Now, we are coming forward to the council suggesting in our upcoming budget a study of different innovative building types. And so what Ms. Dunn has recommended, we've actually already been thinking about, and we're thinking about doing it. We also are, focusing on missing middle housing. And maybe someday, if we get more missing middle housing, that would be more like those 4-story housing types that were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But we don't have it now. It's not being built today.
Are you saying that because the building types themselves are evolving, it just makes more sense to blend them together into simpler categories? Is that basically what you're saying?
Certainly for the impact taxes, it makes sense to blend them, and it's a simplification.
Yeah.
I understand the student generation rate side, but for the impact tax side, it's a simplification. And 4 years from now, if we're able to really have missing middle housing in the way we want it, it might be appropriate to add back in an impact tax specifically for this missing middle that's between a townhouse and a 6, 7, 8-story multifamily. But today, those units aren't being built.
Well,
Okay, no,
go ahead, Glenn. Sorry.
I just want to point out something which really goes across several different recommendations here, not just this one, but many others. It's really an understanding of what an impact tax can be and what can't be. An impact tax, by its definition, and this is nationwide, has to have a rational nexus between what the development is generating as a problem and what the solution is, and having them pay for that problem. The problem is capacity. Whenever a house is built, whenever there's traffic that's generated, there are students that are generated. And so what is the cost of the additional burden on the transportation system? What's the cost of the additional burden on the school system? And it has to do with capacity. So in terms of the school side, it's definitely having to do with student generation. And so it has to be that it's based on data of student generation. Once we have information, the study that Ms. Wright and Ms. Dunn are talking about, it would be perfect, because in 2 years, by the time that's done and by the next update, if in fact it shows that the student generation rate for housing, which is say 6 stories or less, is not that different from 7 stories or more, then there would be the rationale under the impact tax concept to treat them the same. But until we have more data, there isn't. The data is very clear that we have is that there's 3 times as many students generated out of what is now defined as 4 stories or less versus 5 stories or more. And so we're more or less tied to that because it is the impact.
Yeah.
And again, this strays to other resident. You'll see other concerns we're going to raise on this very same point on other recommendations in the CGP. But on this one, that's I just want to make that point. Thank you.
Okay. Now, I've also got requests from Mary Beck and Meredith, and then Nancy. So why don't we just hear from the institutions, and then the council members can follow up as they want. So
Okay.
all right, Mary Beck and Meredith.
Okay. So just one point I did want to make, and it kind of relates to what Glenn is saying, because the impact taxes are calculated as a calculation of student generation rate times per seat cost. And when we did the analysis looking at the fiscal impact statement, the blended rate or the collapsed rate resulted in about a $4.4 million reduction based on our forecast model. So that there seemed to be a consequence, a fiscal consequence.
Say that again. Can you just repeat that?
Yes, there seemed to be a fiscal consequence to collapsing into one rate of about 4.4 million based on our forecast model.
Is it annual or 6-year?
That was annual.
Okay. Okay, Meredith.
Oh, thank you. Yes, the county executive supports the staff recommendation. That was our original recommendation too. The reason being the fiscal reason, but also it's very important to have the most accurate student generation rates possible for the reasons Glenn said, but for the practical reason that you end up with overcrowding that you didn't anticipate, which for years was a serious problem. And it's really great that planning and the school system are now working together. So you'll see throughout the county executive's recommendations that there are recommendations in order to get the most accurate student generation rates.
Thank you. Okay, we've got Will, Andrew, Nancy, Sydney, in that order.
All right, here we go. Thank you all for the information and all the hard work. So at this point, going off of what I think Mr. Orland and Ms. Dunn have said, if there are more students, not if, there are more students being generated from the low-rise 4-story, then the tax should be applied because of the impact. If someone applies for to Miss Wright's point, if they're not building 4-story, which I think you're right on. I mean, you guys are looking at the applications, then the tax wouldn't be applied. So I don't know. So I don't really understand why that would be a detriment. That's what we want. We want it to be accurate. I do think the study of what high rise and low rise is and what's being generation, that all should be done for sure. I mean, I'm having deja vu to our conversation last week about the WMATA bill and how much more expensive it is to build high rise, and we all agree in that those are producing less students, which is kind of a theme of your work here, which I also agree with. But I also raised, as I think was alluded to earlier, that the definition for low rise and high rise has changed, right? You have 6, 7, sometimes even 8, maybe, stories that can be built with stick, and innovation is happening all the time. And so I do think that study will be helpful, and maybe we need to revisit the definition of what it is. But I think the tax itself for what is present for those 4, stories right now, we should keep in place because that's just representative of what's happening. So if anyone has a comment on that, they can, but that seems correct to me. And then I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
So you're expressing support for
the staff, the staff.
Yeah. Andrew.
For those reasons.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting discussion. I really do understand where planning is coming down on this. I think the question is, what is the market doing and what do we want the cost to be? And that certainly is some of this. But when it comes down to it, what this really is a question is of impact and of impact taxes. And if we have data that suggests that there is a difference, then we should be applying that data in as targeted a way as we can. And I think it's a bit of a disservice to the process if we don't do that, even though I can understand the broader public policy benefit. One of the reasons why we don't have the structures that we're talking about is that it doesn't make economic sense to build that. It makes sense to build 6 stories now that you can do a platform and stick. It makes sense, perhaps if you can find a way to do, steel or some, concrete construction, it makes sense to build as tall as you possibly can to justify those building costs. But it really doesn't make sense once you, go through the full entitlement process and the building process to build 4 stories. But we have data that shows it. That's why I was a little interested. I mean, I have more respect for Mr. Sartori's data collection and analysis than just about anybody anywhere in or around county government. But it seemed odd to me, frankly, to hear that the differentiating seemed arbitrary when we have data to show that it's anything but arbitrary. Could you just explain that? Because I'm under the impression here where I totally agree we should do the study for next time. I totally agree with Ms. Wright that we're hoping for different building types, and there could be a market for that as we move forward, and that could be an opportunity to address in the next iteration of this policy. But if we are talking about impact taxes and we have data to demonstrate that there is a student generation difference, I think, in adherence to the policy that's before us now, we, have a need to go by the data that we have, and the data that we have is suggesting that there are differences. But could you explain? You said arbitrary. I don't know what that meant.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you. Well, and I have to say, I think that Council Member Jawando's point is a good one, right? If we're not actually building that, then we're not going to be applying that impact tax and that rate. So it doesn't really matter so much, right? But what I was really meant by arbitrary is that the making the connection between 4 stories and less and 5 stories and more, and associating that as low rise and high rise, and saying that the distinction is low rise versus high rise, where really what it might be is the construction type, right? And it's tough for us even just to change the definition of low rise. Like if we said, all right, let's make high rise 7 stories and up and 6 stories and below is now low rise. Well, we can't look at all old 6-story buildings and say that that was low rise, because that might have been constructed using the more expensive methods, right? So if we can really get to what Ms. Dunn is saying, is this analysis that allows us to better understand the connection between height and construction type and student generation rates, that would be good. The one thing I did want to clarify is what we have noted in there is what council staff has noted in there is that we should do this before the next update, and that's a little problematic. And as Ms. Wright said, we are hoping to look at stuff like this in FY22. The problem is we're required to update the student generation rates and the impact taxes by July 1st of every odd year. So even though we're updating this now, the next update after this round right now is for July 1st of 2021, using the data from the enrollment from today, this very day. So now there are questions about that, because we might say we might want to skip it this year because this might be an anomaly year, right? With MCPS enrollment having come down a little bit because of the pandemic. But we should think about the timing of all of this and whether we want to adjust that from odd year to even year. And but we would gladly, to do what Ms. Dunn has suggested and do this research and see how this all plays out for the future.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that this is an anomaly year for more reasons than us talking here on Zoom and not being in person to go through this and the status of the school system and just about every other aspect of our lives at the moment. But I do agree that we should, find the appropriate time. I would yield to you on when the appropriate time would be, given the work program and the deadlines that are there. But I agree with Mr. Jawando, and will also be supporting the staff recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you. Co-Chair Navarro.
Thank you so much. So, I do appreciate the effort to simplify. I think that obviously this is part of this exercise, but I also am very mindful of the essence of what we're doing here and what impact actually means. And the data that we have in front of us is the data that we have. So, not going to belabor the point. I think that our staff recommendation is what I will support, and I look forward to the work that is going to be done to try to really sort out these nuances, because of course we want to align all of our data or of our approaches, et cetera, to the ultimate goal, which is to produce obviously more units and to be able to reach our targets in terms of housing units. But in this particular case, I think that again, I think our staff recommendation is one that makes sense, and I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Mr. Katz.
Thank you very much. When you're the 5th person or whatever to get to the dance, everything that could have been said has been said. And though I always remember Dale Bumper said, but it hadn't been said by me. And so I am going to support the staff recommendation as well. I think valid points have been made time and time again on this. I'm a believer that until you have the information, you don't have it. And the information you have is what you need to go forward with. And to the point about the anomaly, sometimes maybe we don't get in, we get in our own way. I think that if this timing does not work on this, that we can update it for next year, then we should figure out when the timing will work to update it so that we are that we have the best information possible so that we can go forward in the best way possible. So I'm agreeing with and will support the staff recommendation.
All right, very good. I will as well. Okay, any other comments on this topic? All right, I think we can move on to the next. Pam?
Okay, I'm going to, I don't know if I need to share my screen again, but I do. For the next one, I'm going to share my screen again because The next issue is related sort of to this one, and it's that in calculating student generation rates, the data for multifamily structures is used from 1990 onward. So that's 3 decades worth of information. And I want to show you this wonderful graphic that was in the SSP report that I'm sure Mr. Sartori and Ms. Scavone put together. And it is the student generation rates for multifamily by decade built. And what they looked at was to see, was there really a distinction between the way students are generated by decade? And what they found was that, yes, from 1990 on, our multifamily structures are generating students at a lesser rate than the really, really old multifamily structures. So in some ways, this gets to Ms. Wright's point. If we move to only collecting the student generation rate data for buildings built since 1990, we will have, we won't be capturing some of that really old multifamily that we don't even think represents the multifamily we have or will be getting, especially as it relates to students. Now, I want to make it clear, because this is a super confusing topic, that doesn't mean that MCPS is not counting the students from the older structures, right? This is about whether, when we look at evaluations for development review applications that have not yet been approved, for master plans that are going to happen in the future, for impact taxes on that development that hasn't occurred yet, we're looking at something that we believe represents what's going to happen. And so I believe this distinction of saying, yes, let's use 1990 on, that is more representative of what we are getting currently and what we expect to get in the county, so that will change student generation rates for multifamily, high and low rise. But it doesn't mean that MCPS is saying, oh, well, so right, we only need to worry about the students that are, coming from buildings built from 1990 on. They will still be capturing the students that come from the older buildings. So I know that can cause some concern. And sort of this is how those generation rates look. You can see the bottom table is like countywide if we keep the distinction. And if we only use the data from 1990, you see that it does have an impact on those low-rise buildings, because we know that the older low-rise buildings do generate a lot of students. Again, this is about applying it to new development, applying it to things moving forward. And this is the planning board recommendation to use the data from 1990 on, and council staff supports that recommendation.
Right. So we have agreement between council staff.
Screen.
Right. What's that?
I should unshare my screen so you can chat?
Yeah, probably. If someone may ask you to go back, but so you support the planning board's recommendation on a more refined, narrower, shorter time window for assessing the student generation.
Correct.
I do as well. Any comments on this one? All right. Seeing none, we can continue.
Okay. So the next one, I'm going to go back to, screen sharing, because again, I have some graphics I think are helpful. Give me just a second. Here we go. Okay, so just before I start that, I just wanted to show you this would be the implications then for the impact tax calculations. Compares current, compares it to using the data from 1990 on for multifamily. This comparison is not about any of the other recommendations that are in the bills or related to the SSP. It's just I wanted to give you context for, it sounds like there was no discrepancy in going with the 1990 data, so I just wanted to show this. We'll do more analysis of the impact tax results of all of the recommendations as we go through, but we don't have some of that yet. Just wanted to.
So that is the recommended rate?
This is the resulting rate if we use the 1990 data for the student generation rates applied to this current cost of a student's seat. And so comparing it just to what we charge today. So again, this represents 120% of the cost of a seat. It's trying to just take the 1 or 2 recommendations that the joint committees have just made. Continue to do multifamily, high rise and low rise. and use data from 1990 on for multifamily. That's
the point being that newer multifamily low-rise does not generate as many students as older multifamily low-rise. And so that is presumably the case for a very long time. And so this is a more accurate way to charge newer multifamily low-rise.
and does address a little bit of Director Wright's concern, I think. We're keeping these distinctions, but I think that it's capturing a more accurate view of when we do get low rise, how many students is it producing? Okay,
we have a comment from Meredith.
Yes. Well, I'm struck by these last two slides. The county executive took no position on using the 1990 data, basically because we didn't have enough information, but it seemed reasonable on its face, and I can understand you're not wanting to go back, to the Stone Ages. But I am looking at this concern, and I think I will talk to the boss, and we may reconsider our views on this, because I don't understand the dramatic change in that second column for multifamily, low and high, and also the student generation rates were a little different. And I don't quite understand why the school system's keeping track of it, but it isn't relevant to us. So I guess I'm asking questions.
Well, you'll consult your boss for answers, I'm sure. Very good.
Well, I was asking Pam, actually, but...
Oh, did you have a question that you wanted to ask Pam?
Yeah, I'm sorry. My question is, can you explain why the difference in the rates now is so dramatic? Is it just because the student generation rate is so different?
The two components of this are really, by structure, this cost of a student seat, which isn't changing in this calculation, and the student generation rates. If you go back to this slide, what you can really see is that in the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, those student generation rates are very different from the ones before them. When we calculate student generation rates and we collect it for students coming from all the years that any multifamily has been built in the county, we get a much higher rate. And I think it's intuitive. We know that those really older buildings have much larger units. There are a lot of our 2 and 3 bedroom unit buildings. Knowing that students come from those buildings and all the buildings in the county is important. And that's my point. And that data and that information goes to MCPS. They have it. What we're talking about is calculating student generation rates from 1990 to now for 30 years worth of data, because we see a dramatic difference in the way that the students are generated, and it's been happening for 30 years. And what we're doing is looking forward. What we are going to get moving forward is probably going to be very much like what we've gotten in the last 30 years. And so, as Mr. Orland had said, Dr. Orland had said earlier, this is really about what the impact is. We have the cost of the student seat. Everybody's getting charged that amount, and then it's really to have better information and more context-sensitive information to know the impact of the unit that we're applying that to. And what I'm saying and what the department is saying is, yes, we know that the multifamily for the last 30 years doesn't generate the students the way they did.
That's the key distinction. It's the age of the property, and newer multifamily is not generating students at the same rate, which makes intuitive sense. If we look around us and you see garden-style communities built in the 50s or the 40s, they're going to have more students than those built in the 90s or 2000s. It has a lot to do with price point. Older housing is much more affordable than newer housing. That's why we need a steady supply of new housing coming in to create our future supply of even more deeply affordable housing. It's all related. But okay, Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you. So I don't want to, digress too much on this point, but I think that to me, this has been an interesting issue for a very long time, because again, I think it speaks to the lack of understanding that some people have of who we are in Montgomery County. Montgomery County has been very attractive to families from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different socioeconomic backgrounds, right? So when you look at who we are in the school system, and then you analyze the housing types, it makes complete sense. And, there's data to support this, that a lot of folks, would perhaps choose, because that's their price point, affordability, to live in these multifamily structures that tend to be older, but they have, larger bedrooms. They probably, families share some of that housing. And it's not a new phenomenon. I mean, it's happened. People have, explained to me how, the Long Branch area, for example, how, 30, 40 years ago, perhaps it had a different demographic mix, but nonetheless, it was kind of like the same attraction. And then you have immigrants that come in, and then, folks began to work really hard, and they were able to buy step-up housing up county when that was kind of, very affordable. Now, the new multifamily structures that we're building now, there's no doubt that the price point does not work for many of those families. And so I just constantly want to bring this up because I feel like a lot of times, when we have these conversations, and we used to have these, debates even when the county executive was on the council, it seems like that reality gets lost, like the voices or the existence of a lot of families, especially immigrant families that started coming in the 80s, for example, that trajectory gets lost in a lot of this data. And that's always worried me, because then it means that we're making decisions without that lens, right? So I just wanted to point that out, because it always surprises me when I hear people ask those questions. Like, do we not know who we are in the county? And, where do you think that all those families that qualify for free and reduced meals, where do we think they're able to live? They have to find, options that make sense for them. And I think part of the exercise here looking forward is, how do we then do whatever we can to create and fill that missing middle, so that more families have opportunities to perhaps, aspire and for families to be able to then live in different settings and not just in multi-family structures that are kind of, old, et cetera. So I just wanted to point that out, because it was a conversation I had even when I was briefed on a lot of this notion of how do we capture, how families have had to make do, if you will, in order to afford to live in the county. And I think this particular piece reflects that very, very, very nicely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for bringing that voice into this conversation. I think it's important. And, what strikes me about this as well is, what this shows is that the county is essentially trying to charge impact for how a property is going to be used in like 50 years. Because that's really that's what we're seeing, is that property that's like 50 years old generates a lot more students than property that's 20 years old. And so this proposal is to adjust the rates accordingly. And, to me, that captures Montgomery County right there. We're going to say you're going to have to pay a tax rate for, student generation rate in 50 years. Good luck getting over that hump, and so that's one more reason why we don't get the kind of new housing supply that we need, and we don't have the dynamic investment, generated economy that we want. So I think this is an important finding, and I think it's important for us to draw the distinctions, and I think it's emblematic of the issue of trying to charge so much impact on new development versus the broad-based churning of property, in the economy, which is obviously a different, that's an issue we'll take up separately. But if you're trying to charge for what you think, what we know now, the student generation rate is going to be in 50 years, that is an unreasonable policy in my mind. And I think a 20 to 30 year time horizon is far more fair and far more reasonable. And if whatever that rate is what it is, and I think that's what staff's recommendation is. Any more council members with questions or comments on this one? All right, we'll continue to the next issue.
All right, so Those first two pieces really cover the first of the two main categories we were supposed to talk about this morning as a joint committee. The first one being multifamily structures. You've now covered it, retaining the two structure types and using the data from 1990 to today. And the next big issue is the designation of school impact areas. Right? This is a very data-driven conversation, and it can be challenging to talk about. So I'm going to try to keep it as simple as we can. It is it's very interesting. So the two primary elements of the schools portion of the SSP, two things in the SSP currently treat all areas of the county the same, and that's that we have a countywide set of adequacy standards that apply basically everywhere in the county. If you're over 120%, you enter moratorium today. And the others for impact taxes, we have a countywide impact tax rate. Now, planning does use what are regional generation rates that they create out of the data that they get, and they apply these regional rates to development applications and to master planning, because even by just having 3 regional rates, they have a little more nuance to look at how those applications or those master plans might affect school facilities. But the current 3 regions that they have are based on regions that were set up by MCPS. They follow cluster boundaries, and I have them on the screen while they're, representative of kind of how we might think about the county as well. We have up county, we have rural areas, we have the eastern part of the county, we have western part of the county. Planning staff for this exercise of the SSP said, is there a way to be more intentional about the way that we draw regional student generation rates if we're going to use them? They have a purpose, so let's think about that. And they spent, I can imagine, many months gathering data and analyzing data to do this. It's admirable. They had, they took the county, they split it into 35 planning areas, and then they looked at 3 primary things to say. If we look at the characteristics, these 3 primary things that we think drive student enrollment or student generation, can we get a better grip on how the regions of student generation rate might be assembled? And what they looked at was housing growth, type of housing that would be built, and enrollment growth. And even under those 3 categories, they had multiple metrics that they were measuring, and they put this stuff all together, and they basically created an index. Each one of their 35 planning areas then was sort of categorized based on lots of data. And what you got is in the report, a greenfield area, basically a turnover area, and what they're calling an infill area. And this is what it looked like. And, you can read through the report, the details, and I've worked with planning staff. I got a lot of the details. The only thing that struck me when I looked at the map was just the size of the Clarksburg area, the greenfield area. And it was mainly called the Clarksburg area. And it's quite large. Mostly that is because the data was organized initially using census tract data. Some of the census tracts in the northern part of the county are quite large. But it did have me ask a question of, is this area dramatically different than the rest of the county in its housing growth? Does it really look different? Because we do know that a lot of development has happened in Clarksburg, and we know that a lot of it's been approved. It's not all constructed yet, but Clarksburg is not sitting out there with just lots and lots of farmland waiting to happen. It's in the process. So I looked at this as a way to just say, is the current index, should it really be pulling out Clarksburg differently? And I looked at what are the preliminary plans of subdivision. That's the sort of blue area you're seeing. And, parkland they're not going to develop on, and TDR easements they're not going to develop on. They're going to develop on forest conservation easements. And I don't want to focus on any one little detail of this map, but it's just to say, Clarksburg doesn't stand out as very different than anywhere else, right? So what are we missing? Are we missing something? So I talked to planning staff, and we talked about, was there another thing that could be added to the housing growth part of that evaluation? Because what they looked at was the change in housing from 2013 to 2018, so that's in the past. But they did look at the density of how many unbuilt units were there left in the pipeline. Again, that's already been approved. When we think about the SSP, we have to keep in mind that the SSP is designed to look at the projects that are come before the planning board. They're not just the projects that are sitting in the pipeline, they've already been approved, and they're not just, things that have already been built. So fortunately, and this is in the appendix to the SSP, planning department's already worked and spent a lot of time and good effort on their residential capacity analysis. Ms. Scavone has been leading that, and it's a lot of work, and it's pretty interesting. And what she's looked at is it's basically the zoning capacity of a location based on what's already been built and what's in the pipeline. So it says what's left, right? What's not on the ground and what hasn't been approved. What's the capacity left here for any more residential development? So I asked planning, and Mr. Sartori and Ms. Scavone were both very helpful, and they spent a lot of time helping me with this, but they created another metric, and they placed it into their indexing of the different planning areas, and it was this residential capacity analysis. What is really left to build in these areas? And what happened was the Greenfield area then was classified as turnover. It also looked at, took North Germantown, which had been classified as infill, and it also reclassified it to turnover, meaning that the potential for a lot more new development there was decreased by looking at the zoning capacity that was left. The only other major change that occurred was we looked a little more critically at the eastern part of the county, and we all know that Viva White Oak is intended to develop in the future, and it's intended to have quite a few units. So it seemed interesting that again it was showing up as turnover or blended with the larger Fairland area, and actually that's what it was. Viva White Oak was part of the larger Fairland census tract planning area that planning had looked at. So Mr. Sartori said, well, let's, if we take the census tract that is that area and we pull it out, the redevelopment area of White Oak, does the data show something different? And that's what happened. So pulling it out and then applying this residential capacity estimate again, because there's lots of capacity in that redevelopment area. That area, the redevelopment area in White Oak, went from turnover to infill. And the reason infill and not greenfield, because I know everyone's going to ask, well, why not greenfield, is that the nature of infill is that the housing coming is going to be much more multifamily than single family detached or even attached. And that is the projected unit type mix that is expected out there, that it would be more predominantly multifamily, not maybe high rise, it could be low rise, but more multifamily. So that's driving that to be infill.
Okay.
And these are the associated generation rates, but I can leave the maps up if you have questions.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Pam. Why don't we turn to Casey for some comments about the vision of the planning board draft, and Gwen, I think, wants to comment a bit, and then we can continue the dialogue from there.
I don't know if Casey wants to start. Did you want to lead off?
Here he comes.
Yeah, sorry, I was just looking for the mute button there. I think it would be helpful to consider this question together with the question of the moratorium concept. And I think I understand there are a variety of reasons why these things get scheduled and split up in the way they do, but I think it's sort of unfortunate that this work session has split off these issues about classification of different parts of the county and what their growth pattern is and how that matches up with schools from the related issue of moratoria. So I would just urge you to keep in mind as you're thinking about this, at the next go-round, you're going to be asked to consider whether to abandon the moratoria in areas of the county that are no longer greenfield development. And I think the reason that both the planning board and the planning staff made the recommendations that they did about these classifications was it was in effect a recognition that at one time the moratoria policy had a logic to it, that the premises of the moratorium policy are rooted in the idea that new development is driving school capacity constraints and crowding. And so we felt that in areas of the county where the data showed there was greenfield development of a type that prompted this policy to be adopted many years ago, that we should retain it. And in those parts of the county that no longer match those premises, those assumptions, because new growth is not what's causing school crowding, it's infill and turnover, that the moratorium policy is no longer appropriate. Why not? Because new development's not causing the crowding, so stopping new development is not going to solve your crowding problem. And in fact, it's counterproductive to stop new development in areas where turnover or infill is driving school capacity problems, because then you're cutting off a source of revenue from school impact payments. And that's also why we recommended the utilization premium. So in areas that are crowded because of turnover or infill, we're recommending an additional payment for new development. So it's not only covering the cost that it is responsible for creating, the school seats that it's generating, it's actually paying a little bit more. So it's helping to solve the problem that's created by other factors. So our concern is you can do whatever you please with the classifications, obviously, and there's a logic to, I think, what Pam is saying, but I would just be careful to consider the relationship between these recommendations and the moratorium idea, because we've been trying to be very principled about applying the recommendation to remove the moratorium in areas where greenfield development is no longer the prevalent situation, and it's no longer what's causing the school capacity issues, and retain it in the places where it is. So if you want to classify Clarksburg differently, great. I think there's a lot of good arguments for that, but I would just be careful, because we tried to be as principled and as objective as possible about deriving these recommendations and lining up the moratorium only in the place where those premises that led it to be adopted in the first place were still present. But maybe Gwen can.
Yeah, no, I think Casey's made a great point.
Gwen, sorry, before you speak. So Gwen's next, then I think Pam wants to respond specifically, and then Will, Andrew, and then Meredith.
So, I feel like my job in this whole discussion frequently is to sort of talk about how these very philosophical, theoretical formulas and things that we work on in the growth policy relate to what's really happening in our day-to-day development review activities on the ground. And what I can tell you is that whatever the charts say, Clarksburg is still very much a greenfields development area. And we have multiple developments coming forward over the next 4 years in Clarksburg that are traditional greenfields development that are exactly the kinds of developments that the original moratorium was created for. And those have not gone through preliminary plan, so they shouldn't be in the pipeline. But I can tell you of 4 to 5 major projects, 200 acres and more for each of the projects that are going to be coming through in the next, they won't all come through even in the next 4 years. We'll be lucky if they come through in the next, 6, 7, 8 years. So I think what Casey pointed out is really important, which is, we as a county, we were smart when we created the original growth policy. I was on a call actually with Carl Moritz this morning, and he was laughing about how we were quickly dismantling everything he had worked on for 17 years. But we were smart when we had a greenfields county. Our subdivision staging policy and annual growth policy, whatever it was called back in the day, was a really innovative and smart idea. And we still have parts of the county that are growing in that way. And Clarksburg is in that situation. But other parts of the county have changed. We've matured. The students are coming as Casey said, from turnover and from infill. They're coming from different places, and we need to figure out how to change our growth policy to respond to that, to provide the housing that we need in those infill areas, to be economically competitive with our other jurisdictions. And, we've just gotten to be too big as a county for a one-size-fits-all approach. And we think that the previous approach made a lot of sense for greenfield development, and Clarksburg is, I actually camped over the weekend at Little Bennett Campground and spent a huge amount of time driving around in Clarksburg and just sort of looking at different sites, pointing them out to my family. They are, it is greenfield, and the other parts of the county are different, and we need some different rules in those places.
Thank you. Okay, so again, Pam, and then we got Will, Andrew, Meredith.
Thank you. All I want to just point out is that really, just to set the future context for what you'll be discussing, I do definitely hear Chair Anderson, and the concern how these things are layered on with other recommendations in the SSP is not lost. It's just, I really wanted to pull out the things that affect both the joint committees for the reasons that they affect the joint committees. Certainly the topic of how anything happens here will get discussed when we do moratorium, and the utilization premium payments. Those are going to be combined. They're going to be combined with a lot of those recommendations that are related to moratorium, any exemptions, things like that. That's going to all be next Monday. What was designed to have the conversation about these school impact areas is planning is using 3 regional rates now for student generation rates to evaluate development applications and do their master planning. They created a very data-driven approach to say, should we use different regions? And using their approach and modifying the data, but using their approach, came up with some modified criteria here that really just says, while Director Wright believes that, Clarksburg looks green, it may be that the development applications that are already approved haven't started building. And that will impact the school system, no doubt. But when we added the piece that said how much more is available based on what's already approved and built, it didn't show a dramatic change. It's going to have still the predominant driver in this area will be turnover. And that can even be turnover of the houses that have been built there in the last 10 years, right? So I would just say that I would keep in mind the recommendation before the committees is you have regional student generation rates for planning purposes, like they currently do, but do you modify them to be these new ones? And if you don't think the data is showing what you thought you expected, then you keep the current regional rates that were created by MCPS or not. And this doesn't have to have a conversation about the moratoria and stuff. That's going to be in the future, and it'll be based off some of these other conversations, but we don't need to consider it today.
Okay. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the discussion. It's an interesting point. I appreciate the modified approach that layers in the zoning capacity. I think that the more data you can have when looking at this, the better. I wanted to ask, I know Ms. McGuire is the school system's view on this point. And then I have one other question, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to give me your where you are and why.
I appreciate that. And I think, so we are certainly part of this conversation, but not, but we have a different relationship, obviously, to the categorization of the housing and for the purposes. And so I think, our interest is certainly more central, as Mr. Anderson was saying, to the moratorium question in some ways. Certainly, we are concerned about the growth in Clarksburg for the same reasons that Ms. Wright was raising, which is we know it's all out there and coming, and we are working to take account of that as part of our projections. That's really our responsibility is to keep an eye on that pipeline and understand what is coming for those enrollment projections. Certainly, the school board has an interest in as much revenue as possible, but understanding, as has been pointed out, the very real constraints around that from a legal perspective. So we, again, appreciate being part of the conversation, but don't have a specific position on whether this area of the county should be designated one way or the other.
Okay, that's helpful. And so, Ms. Wright, I saw you. The question of, is this the accurate way to project, and what's in the pipeline, what you saw? You know, I was up at Little Bennett a couple of weeks ago too, and I know what you mean, and I kind of saw you shaking your head. I think that core question of what is in the pipeline, what's the zoning capacity, and what is coming online, and what will turnover be the main driver versus greenfield. That's what this is hinging on, and I feel like I'm trying to understand the various points here.
Yeah, and I want to be very, very clear. I'm not talking about the fact that, you know, I only shared that I drove around because I thought it was, you know, sort of interesting. I'm not naive enough to say, gee, it looks green to me, so this is going to be a green field. I actually know of at least 4 projects that have not gone to preliminary plan, so they would not be in the pipeline.
So which also means that they would not be in this analysis. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
So they are that are going to generate, one of which is a major rezoning, and it's probably going to be a master plan amendment that we're going to be bringing to you in the next couple of years, that are probably going to generate several thousand more single family attached and detached residential units in this area that are not that have not been approved, and thus they aren't on the ground. They aren't even approved to start thinking about being on the ground.
Would those then be captured by the RED capacity study? You know,
by
the red, you know, I forget, I'm messing the name up.
Sorry, residential.
Yeah, the residential capacity study.
I'm going to let Jason and Lisa respond to that. One of them probably is not captured because I'll just be direct about it. The ComSat site is currently zoned EOF, which doesn't allow for residential. We have been talking to that property owner. They are interested in a master plan amendment process, which may come up not in fiscal year 22, it may not be till fiscal year 23, that would change some of the land use recommendations for that 200-acre site.
Well, and we could obviously, we take the SSP up every 2 years, so we could obviously come. I'm sorry, every 4 years. Yeah, whatever the year.
Every 4 years. But I think the point
the 2 years
is
the minor amendment, right, or whatever.
You know, again, just to name them directly, it's the Pulte property, it's the Egan property, it's the Miles Coppola property, it's the ComSat property, and there are several other smaller, but those are each enormous developments that are going to be, none of which have preliminary plan approval, that are going to be creating a large number of greenfield type single family and detached and single family attached housing.
Okay. Well, if Jason and Lisa can address the residential capacity study, and then I'm done. Thank you.
Sure. I'll just real quickly, and if I say anything wrong, Lisa can chime in. So Director Wright is correct that those 3 that are already zoned for that type of development will be captured in the residential capacity analysis. Those units will show up there as potential future development. But the property that is not zoned for residential right now, it will not show any potential. So it's not showing up in the pipeline, and it's not showing up in the residential capacity analysis either.
Yeah. Okay. But recalculated rezoning would take several years, right? That would not be a quick process.
No.
Right. I'm just, yeah.
Right. I mean, but I think the point is that these projects, which will not build out for the next, none of those projects, if any one of them actually has a shovel in the ground in 3 years, I will be amazed. But the projects are all greenfield. They are all going to be generating children.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
Andrew.
Thanks. I appreciate the discussion as well. First of all, since moratorium was raised, I would be remiss if I didn't mention I have a slight disagreement with Ms. Wright. I think the question is, moratorium being a really smart, forward-looking policy for a bygone era. I'm not sure that it produces the outcome that necessarily we would want. It seems to me like it's more of a nuclear option that works until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, it's catastrophic. And I think that that's a tough public policy to bank a lot on in terms of the county's growth and adequacy of public facilities. But that said, we'll save the moratorium question for another day, and that's more of a philosophical point than a practical point. I'm not sure what the implications will be on this particular plan, since everything interplays with each other like a puzzle. But speaking of that, could perhaps planning and or council staff explain the broader implications to other aspects of this growth policy on the decision that we're making on this point? I mean, what are the ripples? I mean, everything connects to everything else in this plan, and it's not clear to me exactly what the ripples are of this particular decision point. So I'm hoping you clarify.
Sure. I can chime in quickly. I think the two primary things. One, this is going to, again, the planning department is currently using 3 regional rates. This basically says it modifies those regions into 2 based on numerous criteria that they came up with and helped modify that categorized areas of the county. So they will use these regional rates to evaluate master plans when they come in, or are being developed, and when development applications come in. These rates also have implications for impact taxes in that the student generation rate of an area is applied to the cost of a student seat, and that is what development pays. And if you recall, in the planning board draft, the Greenfield area was paying an impact tax that was maybe 50% higher than anywhere else in the county, based on the fact that their student generation rate associated with that geography was so much higher, smaller geography. This would change that you wouldn't be disproportionately charging the development that does come forward in Clarksburg at that much higher rate. They would be getting the turnover rate, because what capacity analysis added to the model says is, on average, turnover is going to be more predominant than anything else in the area.
So I'm still a little bit confused as to, to me, we're talking about Clarksburg as greenfield development. In fact, we've singled it out as one of the last large swaths of greenfield development that exists in the county, reflecting the development pattern that was more common 20, 30 years ago in the county. And yet here, based on the classifications, it would be classified as turnover, not greenfield. And that seems like a disconnect to me. So I'm just trying to understand how we can, I think the policy should be consistent, and it should be coherent, and it should work together. And if in one aspect of this, we are all clearly saying this is greenfield development, we want to put in place a series of policy recommendations on the basis of it being greenfield development, I totally get that. But then we now have this particular decision point where we're saying, well, we ran the numbers, we ran the calculations, and based on the way that we're classifying it, it's actually turnover. I feel like I'm looking at a duck and I'm calling it a cow. I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So, I mean, could we get some clarification on that, unless I'm missing something here? It doesn't seem like this decision reflects the rest of the plan.
Well, who did you want to direct your question to, Andrew? And if I could just say my own understanding, is if I understand council staff's recommendation, they're saying most of the development is already done. So from here on, it's about homes selling and reselling there. And Gwen is saying, not really. There's going to be a lot more greenfield coming forward. That's what I am understanding this distinction.
Okay, so
Ms. Dunn and Ms. Wright then explain that, and then I have one final question.
right. Okay. So basically, this comes down to basically the data and the methods used to say how do we come up with different regional rates that we think represent students from housing growth, type of housing built, and enrollment growth that comes out of housing. And that's the factors that they used when planning staff did this originally. And like I said, they had two factors for the Clarksburg area. The two factors were what was built 2 and 7 years ago. Okay, that's going to be a driver of this. Something built 2 and 7 years ago, and what is left in the pipeline. So we've already approved the developments; they've already come through. What is left unbuilt in the pipeline? It captures that, right? And those two things said, oh, Clarksburg still acts like Greenfield, because when it does have development coming forward, there can be a single family. When I asked planning staff to consider adding something more forward-looking, like the residential capacity analysis that was done, which said, okay, what's the zoning capacity out here? So you kind of have to discount the one project that Ms. Wright's saying will be a rezoning, because that'll happen in the future, and then it can get captured because these rates are being proposed to get these regional rates re-evaluated with every SSP. So we can put the rezoning one aside for a minute. But if you have the residential capacity analysis and you believe it's accurate and you believe that it has useful information, it is basically saying remove everything built, remove everything sitting in the pipeline of development that's been built, right? And then what's left? You have a zoning envelope. You can only build X number more under the current zoning that's out there. When that piece got added, Clarksburg no longer was indexed. Okay, these things then get classified through that model. It no longer was classified as Greenfield. It was classified as turnover. And so all council staff is saying is if that's the case, which I actually believe that's accurate, because I think that adding the more forward-looking piece of information, which I think is great analysis that was done by staff at planning, I think it creates two regions in the county. How it plays with the conversations later with moratorium and other things, it will have an impact on that. But I think that the council can make the same decisions they might have made. Is there areas the county should be in moratorium? Should there be a countywide moratorium? Should there be no moratorium? That can still happen. But for this is about impact tax rates, the implication, and it's really about the student generation rates. It's really ultimately more even than impact taxes, because it's the student generation rate that calculates impact tax. What is this? And if no one thinks that this is accurate, this modification, I would argue that I don't think either one is something that maybe is ready enough to make this change. And that what the council and committee should consider is keeping the regional rates that are already in place and revisiting this at another SSP.
All right.
Yeah, so sorry, the last point here. I mean, I am concerned about what's seemingly inconsistency of something that we're basing a lot of other decision points on it being greenfield development and yet classifying it as turnover in this particular case. I'm not questioning the data that is being used. I think the data sounds like it's accurate. I'm questioning, the fact that if an equation results in something that doesn't compute with anything else, perhaps there is a concern and a problem with the formula and the equation itself. The other question, and I'll raise, is the question of a student in one part of the county versus a student in another part of the county. I mean, I think transportation is different. There are dramatically different costs to the type of transportation infrastructure that we build, and I am totally under the belief, philosophically and practically, that it should be drastically more expensive to build in areas that are farthest away from core infrastructure, rail, etc. I'm not, and sewer and other things are true of that too. I'm not as convinced that there's a significant cost difference between a student in Bethesda and a student in Clarksburg, and so that's something that I think we need to grapple with as well. I think the generation rates may be different, and we should be using the data to determine how we arrive at it. But one variable should be the cost of a student. Another variable should be the generation rate for the building type, both the structure and the the type of, is it redevelopment, infill, is it turnover is at Greenfield. And then that should result in the answer. And I'm not sure we've set up a system that really does that, and it doesn't seem all that complicated if we have all the data that works in order to establish a system that sets that up. So those are my points. I don't know where I'm landing on this because I'm still confused. I have more questions than answers, frankly.
That's okay. That's the life of the council member. Okay, I've got my co-chair followed by Sydney.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we're all trying to follow the bouncing ball. I would agree with Councilmember Friedson in the sense that I think consistency is important. When I first began to look at this proposal, the classifications made sense to me. I think what Ms. Wright also has shared is important. I think we need to also recognize, that area in terms of the patterns of development and the issues and challenges regarding the infrastructure as well. So although I, again, appreciate Ms. Dunn's, additional research on this, to me, I think that the planning board's recommendation just resonates a lot more, makes a lot more sense in terms of what is happening on the ground. And then again, some of the issues around infrastructure and adequate public facilities there. So I'm going to stick to the planning board's recommendation on this one.
Thank you. I concur. Sydney.
Thank you. First, I do appreciate the discussion as well. And I do obviously look forward to the conversation about moratoriums. I think I'm willing to wait, but I do believe they're all tied together, and I think that's very necessary. I think we have to keep in mind that green fields of today are the turnover areas of tomorrow. Sometimes tomorrow takes 10 to 20 years, but it's exactly what part of the problem that we have now. And we can see it in other things as well. I always look at parking spaces, and depending on the area that you're in, some areas don't need as many parking spaces because the government has built infrastructure near them. Other areas, the government has not built metro and other areas, other mass transit near them. So therefore, they need more parking spaces for themselves. And when you start out in a townhouse development, as an example, you say, well, you only need 2 parking spaces because it's 2 people, 2 adults, and you have 2 kids, and therefore the 2 adults are the ones who are going to be driving. And then 15, 20 years later, those kids drive as well. So you need parking spaces for those children. We didn't plan on it, but we should have planned on it because things change, and as areas develop and change, we need to keep that in mind. Part of the other problem that we have, candidly, is that when the money is generated for these areas, we don't give relief, immediate relief. We give, in fact, a lot of times we never give relief, or if we do, it's very slow coming. That we say, we need a new high school, but it'll take another, we're not really at that much overcapacity, so therefore it'll be another 10 years before we have it. Well, in some cases, that's a child's entire school life. They're in a high school or a elementary school for those 12 years, and we've never given them relief. They've lived in overcrowded areas for schools for all that time, though we have generated some funds. We haven't generated enough, but we've generated some funds. So I do believe we need to look at it in a holistic way. I think that's part of the problem that we've had over the years in many, many cases. I do agree with Andrew. I think the cost of a student should be the same regardless of where that student's desk is located. And in fact, in Montgomery County, we, over the years, have decided that a student in Clarksburg can go to Montgomery Blair. I mean, there was a time you never did that, but now you do. So there's all of these various factors that we need to be looking at, and I think we need to continue to look at. And the last point is, I know that MCC PTA is concerned about classifying the purple line station area as infill, and I'd like to know what, and though that's not my district, I'd like to know what was the rationale for saying that that would be infill. Thanks.
Well, that sounds like a question for the planning board.
So I can tackle that initially. The thought there was that the planning board had decided to treat all red policy areas as infill. And part of the issue was that the way we ran our designations using the process that Ms. Dunn explained, we couldn't really carve out, those existing red policy areas exactly how they're drawn. We had everything tied to census tracts. So unless it was tied to a census tract, we couldn't say, well, let's take out all the red policy areas and see if they fall out as infill when we ran our model. So, we ran the model, and the larger areas that they're part of, in some cases were considered infill, in other cases were considered turnover, but then the planning board they said, basically, these red policy areas are where we want to see infill type of development, and where we are when you look at those narrowly defined red policy areas, that's the type of development we're planning for there and the type that we're getting. And so part of their recommendation was to go ahead and classify all purple line station areas as red areas as well. Now, I think there are so many recommendations, and I forget where your committees came out on that last week. But if we continue to classify those as red policy areas, or even treat them differently, that's something that you all can consider whether or not the red policy area should be part of the infill.
Thank you.
All right, so the co-chairs are in agreement in supporting the planning board's recommendation. And we'll hear comment from the executive branch, and then we can vote. Mary Beck.
Yes. Well, my concern is all about the money, the money, the money.
Show me the money.
Yes. If I had more courage, I could sing it. No, I think that a couple things I did want to just say. We certainly understand and acknowledge that new development is not the only thing driving school overcrowding, but it's driving a piece of it. And I think embedded in some of the topics we'll get to later with the exemptions and the discounts, there's an underlying assumption that through impact tax pricing, you can influence development. And if that is true, then is there a concern that you can disincentivize development in Clarksburg? And if that is what you want, then the impact on our collections will be much greater than had been predicted, because what the analysis showed, and I understand it's got a lot of factors going into it. It's not just the 3 classifications, but what we were showing in terms of historical stuff is that our impact taxes would be down by about 24 million, but that was making up or was cushioned by a $17 million increase in greenfield. In pipeline analysis, it was even more extreme, so it was, we were overcoming a $78 million reduction in infill. So if your intent is to disincentivize development in Clarksburg, then we will lose even more in impact tax revenues.
Under the planning board, under the council staff recommendation.
No, I'm not sure yet about the council staff recommendation because we've still been working through those numbers, but under the planning board recommendation for sure.
Right, well, planning board, okay.
Can I make a point?
Can I just
go ahead.
mention in our previous discussion, we agreed on school impact tax rates for single family detached and single family attached that would be based on multifamily since 1990. And those rates are almost exactly what the current rates are. So even if we are saying that Clarksburg has to pay the current rates, the full rate, the full amount, it's really not that different
Right.
from
What
the
would be
current
different would be
rate.
shifting it to infill. At infill, and then it would pay a lower rate.
Right. We
Correct.
didn't in the previous discussion show what they would be if we had different regional rates, because that wasn't part of the discussion. If you move to different regional rates, it is probably on one of the pages in the staff report, but in the draft, it's dramatic for Clarksburg. Okay.
Right. So what
I
we're
Not the
thought
same
we
as the current.
I'd like to go back and look at those numbers, or maybe Jason can comment on them, but I thought we had tried to make that change a little less dramatic.
well, I'm under the impression that the planning board recommendation is essentially status quo around Clarksburg, and that shifting to infill would be a change, more of a change.
Yeah. So if I could, if the Clarksburg area remains as Greenfield, the Greenfield impact tax rates are relatively high because they're based on high student generation rates. And just to in response to, I believe Councilmember Friedson was talking about using the student cost, we do apply one single countywide student cost or cost per seat. What makes the difference is the student generation rates. So if we go with the planning board recommendation of keeping that as Greenfield, the impact tax rates there are relatively high. If you go with council staff's recommendation and make that turnover, now the students that are being generated there are now being blended into the turnover rates. So the turnover rates are likely to increase a bit because you're adding more housing that is generating more students into the turnover count. The one thing I did want to clarify and just make sure you're aware of, considering your earlier decision to continue with the multifamily split between high rise and low rise, is that if you go with the multifamily split and you go with the you go with using Greenfield, there is only one high rise structure in what we currently classify as Greenfield. And we can't, even based on our agreement of data sharing agreement with MCPS, we can't report student generation rates for a single structure. And the number of students that are coming out of that, we can't report that. And so we wouldn't be able to calculate a Greenfield multifamily high-rise impact tax because we can't use that student generation rate. Now, if you don't do the distinction between high-rise and low-rise, then we're fine. Because we do have a good number of multifamily structures. It's just they're mostly low rise.
Okay.
So, sounds like tail wagging the dog there on that issue. What we're supposed to do. Will?
So just to be clear on the distinction, if you went to turnover, and Mr. Satori was mentioning this, if you go with the two distinctions and Clarksburg area is included in turnover, which are higher than infill, right? You know, like as far as the rates. So you would generate more on that. There would be some difference. If someone could state for me the difference between if you did that and then if you had the Greenfield, what the revenue difference would be, to Ms. Beck's point. It's not that significant, right? It's like $6 million or something. Or what is the? Yeah. What is the? Is that the difference?
I'm not sure I understand the question, or if we had that analysis done. There's so many layers here.
So if you went with the turnover distinction and charged those rates, those regional rates, what would be the difference in revenue generated or impact tax revenue generated if as opposed to if you went to the Greenfield rates? That's what I'm at. Do we know that?
I'm not sure that we have the comparison of what having the two regions would be compared to keeping the Greenfield in there. I know that when I spoke to LMB, they were looking at simply going from what the current status of impact taxes are today, which is a countywide rate, to having just two regional rates. That change in revenue was relatively small because I'm not sure whether it's, I just know that, and Pofen is in the call as well, and she could maybe chime in because she did the work for us. But I don't know that they can, or if she has the data in front of her to say, well, what does that mean when you can keep that Greenfield rate in there that's, so high?
So we do know the answer for from current to turnover.
Right, from current to turnover, and I think it was in the thing I had on my screen. I can try to go back to share that again quickly. because I don't know that it's in the report because I got it yesterday. So let me see if I can find that for you quickly. These were the student generation rates if you only had the two areas compared to countywide. We can go back and look. And this was a quick analysis that OMB spent, they're just amazing. They've really jumped in and they're analyzing stuff constantly. Poor Kofan, I don't think she sleeps. Anyway, there's a pipeline analysis that shows over a 10-year period, the loss from just having the two rates versus a countywide rate is about 5 million. And then if you looked at historical data, a 6-year time period over the 6 years of the CIP, the loss would be about 3 million. So that ranges, 3 to 5 million over anywhere from 6 to 10 years.
Right. Okay.
It's pretty modest change
So it's
in
not
the impact taxes. To go to the 2 regional rates. Now, if you went to 3, we don't have it because, again, you have to think, the planning board draft also said if you go to 3, then you only collect 100% of the cost of a student seat. And then discount areas of desire. There's a lot more things going on there.
Right. There's a lot of factors. And okay, so that was my point was, and you can unshare now, it's a small difference to do what you've proposed. But to Ms. Beck's last point, the other thing is that if we know that the greenfield areas tax, because of the proposal, the impact taxes would go way up, the cost of development. And so the potential on disincentivizing development there and what that loss could mean is something we don't know and can't calculate, but that is something that should be thought about probably. Okay.
Well, and you did get testimony from a variety of sources on this. And one of the recurring pieces of testimony when there was a concern of the areas, yes, you had the MCCPTA concerned about including purple line in the infill and red areas, but you then had others that wrote in concerned about the greenfield area and the way that was pulled out and the impact of that on impact taxes in the future.
Which would raise the cost of the housing and
a lot. Right.
This point we were having earlier, I think Councilmember Navarro brought it up, the step up housing, like where you move to get the larger home that's less expensive, that could impact that. And just, all right, so I think that's something, I think I'd lean towards your proposal based on that and what we don't have right now. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Now, Councilmember Friesen and I are observing we haven't touched on the North Germantown and the White Oak, other recalculations. I just wanted to briefly ask Essie about this issue, Essie from MCPS that was observed, about a single building. Is there some way that could be addressed?
So thank you. And as Mr. Sartori said, we certainly have responsibilities as the school system and our partners, the agencies that we work with, to protect student privacy. And that is the rationale for what he's raising there. I would like to think that if that was a decision that the council made, that we could work through some sort of proxy or workaround situation, even if it's really about the reporting and the privacy protection. And we would be happy to work on that with Park and Planning to secure privacy in some way if that's needed.
When it comes to setting a tax rate, you can work with us on something like that. It doesn't have to. Okay, that's appreciated, all in our mutual interest. So let me just ask Pam about those other two areas. Then Andrew wants to speak, and then we'll go to Meredith.
Thank you. What I would say that if you make the decision that you want to stick with the initial analysis that was done to classify these areas, and you decide that what you want to stick with is the one that classified a greenfield area, then North Germantown would stay greenfield, it would stay infill, because that was that initial analysis and how it was classified. I wouldn't pick and choose. You either say,
You say it's sort of one or the other.
Changes it or you don't. Now, the White Oak redevelopment area that was pulled out is a little bit of a different story there, because that said, like other things that Mr. Sartori has already discussed with you, their process pulled a few places out of the larger census tract to take a look at, and that was the process for the White Oak RDA. So you could still treat the White Oak RDA separately because you have a process that speaks to that's being done for other locations. Neither criteria evaluation changed that, but I would Clarksburg and the North Germantown planning areas should either both stay greenfield or change according to the new criteria.
Okay, so North Germantown and Clarksburg go together. White Oak is separable. Why don't we could just take these up? You know, White Oak certainly seems more to me like infill than turnover. I mean, there is some development that's coming, and an infill essentially means more development than turnover.
And it basically means that the structure types are going to be predominantly multifamily.
So is there any objection to that change? Okay, thank you. Not seeing any. Andrew, you're up.
Yeah, I think we solved my two issues. One, I was going to ask this particular point, and I think that's been resolved. And the other, I think Ms. McGuire spoke to that. I certainly agree with the point of the tail wagging the dog, that we shouldn't make a policy based on understandable and important confidentiality issues. We should just figure out how to address the issue in an appropriate way. So thank you.
Meredith.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the county executive had not supported these three divisions in the first place. So we see this as a step in the right direction, that being the staff's recommendation. The county executive has already expressed serious concerns about the singling out of Clarksburg in this plan. First of all, these very high impact taxes, and as Ms. Beck explained, how that could affect revenues. And also because it becomes more of a plan about housing and less of a plan about students. Now, the one concern that the executive has is that he does strongly believe that we need some sort of an emergency button in case of very severe overcrowding. And so we are concerned about Clarksburg no longer having an option for moratorium. But I think, first of all, I think there's some confusion about where students come from. It's not as if we're not going to get students from infill and turnover, particularly with infill. If we succeed as a county, we will have many students from infill. Look at what is being suggested, student generation for White Oak. So the SSP just deals with new students coming from new development. Now, how many there are may vary with the area, but that's our focus. So I think this is a great step in the right direction. It clarifies, I know it's complicated, but all of it's complicated. And I see this as a clarification rather than a major change.
Thank you. All right, so Co-Chair Navarro and I have, stated our views. So I think we should ask for a motion. Ms. Navarro, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move the planning board recommendation.
Okay, and I will second that. But with the, but with the exception of the White Oak, which we concur with staff. Is that right, Ms. Navarro?
Yes, correct.
Okay, discussion to the motion, which we've already been discussing. Okay, all those in favor, show of hands. Okay, all those opposed? Okay, 4-1. 4-1. Very good. Pam, does that conclude our business today?
Yep, then you're all done. Thank you.
How about that? All right, we'll keep moving. The PHED committee will meet this afternoon. Thank you to everyone for participating this morning. See you soon.